The stories about libraries could be very different and diverse. They could be about buildings, about people, about events, about books, of course. We need to share stories that are important to us and to our community at the time. When I got married 15 years ago, I moved to live in my husband's city, here in Jelgava. The place was quite unfamiliar to me. The surroundings seemed ugly and even uninteresting, and it was difficult to find something to fall in love with. I didn't want to feel like that for too long, so I decided to apply for a job at the library. Somehow I thought that it could be the right place where I could find a way to love the city I am living. And in many ways, it really worked. However, starting my job in the city's library 5 years ago, it was interesting to discover that, like I found many things unattractive in the city, the library staff sometimes did not enjoy their workplace. And it was not because of the job, but because of their work environment. For 13 years, the library has been housed in an old pre-war 3-story apartment house, undergoing periodic repairs, but still waiting for major renovations. It is quite easy to feel an affiliation with your workplace, to be proud of it, if it's a great library, an example of architecture and design, a renovated, beautiful historical building, or a smart, green, sustainable library. But how do you deal with belonging to a seemingly awkward or sometimes even ugly building? My answer is, you can deal with it. Just find the right story to tell. So, my short story of today will be about the Jelgava City Library building and its surroundings, because it is the way to gain a sense of belonging to a place. It is a way of allowing us to look at familiar things and places with new eyes. It is a way to form our common identity. Sometimes we tend to look at a building up close. Then we see that the plaster has peeled off in some places, that the bricks of the building have broken in places, that some things should be fixed here. But wait, let's take a closer look. What exactly do these old bricks mean to our library building? To see it, we need to look at the library from a distance. So, let's go across the street. Let's go back to the past for a moment. Imagine it is 1944, the final days of the Second World War. On the 21st of July, Soviet forces began airstrikes on Jelgava. They were bombing the city for a week, and it burned for 3 days, destroying 90% of its structures. Only a tiny part of the bombed area was renovated. Most of the ruins were removed, thereby giving way to the construction of identical mass-built Soviet houses. The extensively rich historical heritage of the city was burned and swept away from the public memory. The City Library of Jelgava has been housed in the historical area of the city in one of the rare buildings which survived the bombing of 1944. So, when you look at our library building, you see not only a simple old house which has been adapted to the library needs, you see a witness of a past. You see walls that can speak as long as you are willing to hear what they have to say. This house was built in the second half of the 19th century in eclectic style. Among various other characteristics, eclecticism is represented by rhythm and plasticity, and very often this is achieved with nothing but a rhythmic layer of bricks. Brick in eclecticism is not simply a material, but a means of realizing form. Take a look. Despite the fact that the facade of the house is covered with a layer of Soviet-era plaster, we can clearly see through it that it is the arrangement of bricks that gives the house a rhythm. If we now imagine together that we were standing by the sea, our bare feet are rhythmically washed by waves. They play the rhythm. The waves start small and grow bigger and even bigger. The sea ripples and sometimes calms down, and white foam waves crash over our feet. If you look closely at the facade of our library building, you will see the same sea that has just washed at your feet. Take a look. In the arrangement of the windows of the first floor of the house, you can see the calm sea. The window coverings are straight. When you climb to the second floor, you can already feel a slight sea wave. The window coverings are semicircular. The moment you raise your eyes to the third floor, you see that the waves are the highest in the arched windows. And at the very top ledge, by the roof, you see small waves of foam trickling over your bare feet. The sea also rumbles on the backyard of the library building. But do you see the difference? Look up. On the courtyard side, the windows no longer have a rhythmic wavy arrangement. But even if there is no sea, like on the facade, the courtyard keeps some stories of a sailor who wasn't very fond of children, as well as stories about the floods that enter the library yard every spring, and about a fish that accidentally entered the sandbox with floodwaters. These are the stories entrusted to me by the old gentlemen who grew up in this house as little boys. And they conjure up a whole world, a book that can only be read together. However, the angry sailor lives here behind this window. Now our library books are kept there. But at the beginning of the 1960s, a sailor used to sit here by an open window once returning from long journeys through the rippling seas and read a newspaper. In front of the window there was a sandbox for the children of the house. The children, like all children, were loud and carefree. The sailor, on the other hand, wanted to read his newspaper in peace and quiet. It is 1994. Men in plaid flannel shirts walked down the street. Jelgava hummed silently. I stood in the library doorway, waiting for them to pass by. I was a little afraid of them, like I was of everything. After waiting a moment, I went out and saw that the sky was bright. It was April 5th, 1994. I took 2 steps and looked over to see them stop in front of the grocery store, taking up the entire sidewalk. No, I wasn't afraid, I just didn't want to offend them by overtly crossing to the opposite side of the street. So I decided to turn left and take the shortcut home through several interconnected courtyards between apartment buildings. Usually I stick to the streets, leaving the obscure spaces to the footballers and other déclassé elements. But today I strode confidently into the first courtyard. There was a strange object in the courtyard directly behind the library. A smallish brick cube with an unknown purpose. Maybe it was the ventilation shaft for Hell's coat room or something. And directly on top of this cube sat a second group of guys. All three were smoking. Doom 94 is Jānis Joņev's debut novel, translated into 11 languages, published first as Jelgava 94 in Latvia in 2013. The story is set in the 1990s in Jelgava. Right there, Jānis Joņevs takes the reader deep inside the world of music, through the lens of youngsters' mind in the style of their intimate diary pages. The novel begins exactly in the doorway of our library, and this strange brick cube, which the writer called the ventilation shaft for Hell's coat room, hides several legends, all which conflict with the others. This place has a strange attraction. Every day it gathers a variety of people around it. Come to our library courtyard one day and take some time to observe what happens here from time to time. Before the Second World War, this house was a rental house. Doctors, a grain trader, a shoemaker, and a seamstress have all lived here. Latvians, Germans, Jews, Russians, Lithuanians. In turn, after the end of the Second World War, the house was handed over the nearby prison, and the prison staff and their families lived there. In 1984, our library was established in the house. For more than 100 years, different people with different destinies have walked around these places, breathed, loved, and also suffered in these walls. And this small, narrow street. At one time, fuel was delivered through it. At other times, it was dark and stamped with horrific murders. Today, it is a place to meet and talk about the past, about today and about tomorrow. A place where nothing is forgotten, a place to think and a place to talk. That is exactly why there are libraries in our lives. Our library does not have only books in its collection. In fact, the building itself is an important part of the collection. And we still have to learn how to read the stories whispered to us by the library walls. We still have to learn how to tell these stories. And we need you who are willing to listen to our stories and willing to share your own stories. If you want to know more about our library, for example, about the cat whose meows we could hear through the walls, did prisoners sentenced for very serious crimes really live in this house after being released from the nearby prison? Where does the ghost of our library live? And what does he do when library is closed? Why does it make a big difference whether the head of Lenin, Stalin, or Christian's barons is painted on the wall of the library event hall? Visit our Jelgava City Library and we will have the opportunity to talk about all these things and even more.